What's up, guys?
This is Anshul and Alex from Orange County Performance, back with another video teaching you how to live well and move well. Today, we're going with our 3-step process on how to fix your hips, get them pain-free, make you feel good. Boom, and right here on the board is gonna be our 3-step process that we're going over today. So we're starting off with the soft tissue, going into our mobility, and then finishing off with our strength and stability.
Soft tissue mobility is where we break up knots and muscle adhesion. We also are starting to create awareness of those muscles so we can prep some range of motion and get ourselves into some mobility moving forward.
Mobility, dynamic movement through range of motion, circulating synovial fluid. All these joints are synovial joints, so we want to get that fluid moving as much as possible, increasing the blood flow. And then the last thing is improving postural awareness for anyone with an anterior or posterior pelvic tilt. Today, we're going to show you how doing some mobility and stability exercises can fix both of those things.
Strength and stability. Then the goal is to prevent injuries by working on our range of motion at deep positions. At the bottom of the squat, we want to work on being stable and loading it so that when we get to these positions in sports, we can then have nice and stable knees to prevent injury.
And going off that, with our tendon and joint support, the hip directly supports the knee. So the knee should not be doing the stability, and it should not be performing any type of range of motion outside being a hinged joint, right? So with the hips, we want to support our tendons and our joints and our knees and in our ankles.
And then lastly, it increases bone muscle density and power because we're trying to move heavy weight quickly, and also we're trying to load those weights appropriately as we move up.
And don't forget, a stable joint is a powerful joint. So let's get into it. We're starting off with some soft tissue on the quad. We're gonna grab a foam roller, load our weight all over the side that we're working, and we're gonna try and get a long range of motion through the entire quad and roll it out. So this is gonna be the beginner level, right? So as soon as we get this beginner level out of the way, we can move on to the intermediate, which is gonna be a barbell.
The reason the barbell is a little more advanced is because it's a little bit heavier. And then also, instead of just using our body weight on a larger surface area, this is a little bit more dense of a surface area, and you can manually control how much weight you put on it. So as you can tell, he's in quite a bit of pain going through this.
Yeah, it does not feel good, but it'll pay dividends. So.
Yep. And then lastly, we have our acupuncture ball.
And so for our advanced movement for the soft tissue, we're gonna get a ball with some texture on it. The texture is gonna help break up even more than something like a barbell or a soft surface would. So now Alex is really going through it here, breaking up those adhesions with a textured ball through that entire range of motion. The quads are hip flexors, right? So whenever we're flexing our hip, we're using our quads. The glutes and hamstrings are hip extenders, right? So whenever we're extending our hips. So it's very important to work on every single muscle that connects into the hip.
The glute max is our main stabilizer. That's our butt that we typically refer to. We really want to break into this because this is our main hip stabilizer. This is also what allows us to extend our hips and open up the hip flexors. And then on top of just our glute max, we also have our glute med, which is our main internal and external rotator of the hip. And it controls that through squatting, deadlifting, any athletic movement that we do. It's really important to break it up because if you have any blockage in internal or external rotation, most of the force is gonna then go down to the knee joint. And that's not what we want.
Now we're gonna get into the hamstrings right here. So I'm gonna get the barbell and really work into the belly of that muscle underneath the ischial tuberosity, making sure to not roll out that attachment. So from here, breaking that up, and we're moving on to the adductors. The last part is the adductors. Alex is going through it pretty bad right here. We're just breaking up all those adhesions, and that's gonna complete our 4-corner soft tissue for the hip.
One of our favorite exercises is the sumo stance good morning, where our focus is we're trying to get into a wide stance, and we actually go a little bit wider than typical for sumo because we're really trying to stretch out the adductors. And then he's gonna complete a good morning where he's gonna shoot his hips back and making sure his pelvis is rotating with his torso and not allowing him to flex at the back. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna open up his hamstrings a lot, and it's also going to make his adductors start to flex and work really hard at that lengthened position. And when you go down on this, I also want you to pay attention to your knees and make sure they're rotating in as you push your hips back. And that should allow you to move your pelvis a little bit more efficiently.
Now we're getting into one of my personal favorite movements, the hip car. The scientific name is a controlled articular rotation, but we just call them hip circles. So we're just gonna come back here. Alex is gonna be up engaging his hip flexor, he's gonna come out, and then he's gonna come around, and he's gonna control that rotation the whole way through and come right back up to the top. The cues here are to keep that core super engaged, only move throughout the hip, and make sure that that internal rotation piece is as much as you can possibly go. Remember, work in your pain-free range, because at the end of the day, the more you do this, the more range you're gonna get out of it.
Another exercise we really like to emphasize for people is a dynamic couch stretch, where we're gonna get our back foot elevated on a surface of some sort, knee on the floor, and then from here, notice how he's reaching with his arm. As he does that, he's gonna make sure he squeezes his butt, because our main focus is we're trying to get this front part of our hip to get as long as possible and stretched out. And then going through the active range of motion is just gonna allow him to get more and more range through each and every rep.
Now we're gonna move into a kettlebell weight shift. So what this one looks like is you're gonna have your heel and your knee in line with each other, straight line between those 2 points. We're gonna squeeze the glute to open up the hip. And from here, we're driving our knee out, keeping our chest nice and square. And we're holding for 5 seconds and then going back. A really good way to bulletproof your hips is gonna be a Nordic curl. Alex is up here on a GHD doing a couple reps. The Nordic curl is an extremely challenging exercise because it works your hamstrings at length. Think of a bicep curl. When you curl at length, it's much harder. So we're doing the same thing, but with our hamstring. The knee is a hinge joint, just like the elbow is a hinge joint, and the hamstring flexes the knee the same way the bicep flexes the elbow. So max load at length is gonna create an extremely strong hamstring group. And that's exactly what we want for our athletes and for our general population that are dealing with hip pain or knee pain.
We have the reverse Nordic curls. Where these are beneficial is we're working the quadricep muscle group at a lengthened position, and this knee joint in the anterior part of the knee is getting to a fully extended position, and then he has to flex those tendons and the bottom of the quad to start pulling his entire body and torso up. He's using his glutes to keep his hips forward as he descends down and as he returns back up to his tall kneeling position.
Before we get into our last 2 strength movements, Alex is gonna get into an internal rotation lift where he's leading with his heel and then squeezing that foam roller with his adductors and coming up, and you're gonna feel it deep in your hip. A lot of power comes from internal rotation of your hips. So this is a great way to prime those movements, those deep flexion movements, through this internal rotation exercise.
In ATG back squat, where we're focusing on trying to get our butt as low as we possibly can to the floor. If you could get even your hamstrings to touch your calves, this helps strengthen the glutes and quads at their longest positions, which will help prevent injuries, build more power in our athletic movement, and will just overall increase range of motion.
Our last exercise for strength and stability is gonna be a high box step up. Here we're lengthening the glutes the entire way, and we're creating power out of that lengthened position. Again, strength through mobility and range of motion is key for pain-free performance, and that's what Alex is showing you right over here.
I know a lot of the exercises that we recorded here today are very advanced. I just want to let you guys know that there are regressions that you can work on at your skill level to allow you to get pretty much the same stimulus.
It's extremely important to work at your own pace and your own range of motion, because understanding that the more you do it, the more range you will get out of these exercises. So start slow. Starting off with some resistance bands or dropping the height of your step-ups or your squat is going to be the progression that you want to look for.
Thanks for tuning in today, guys. I hope you learned something new and got something out of our pain-free movement.
If you have any comments, questions down below, we're going to answer. Again, this is for you guys. We really appreciate you tuning in, and we're going to see you next time.
Out.